Jared Blaine is a Los Angeles stockbroker and analyst. He recently used a discounted cash flow model to analyze stocks in the semiconductor industry. After publishing his results on his blog, he calls one of his best clients and tells him to buy YYU since it is undervalued by 50%, without mentioning the model he used. Blaine has most likely violated the standards because A, his model is probably wrong. His model probably is wrong, let's be honest, but this isn't a violation in and of itself. You don't have to be precise and get things right that are pretty much impossible to get right in order to comply with the standards. B, he does not distinguish between opinion and fact. This sounds like it will probably be our answer, and the key here is he tells him to buy since it is undervalued by 50% without mentioning the model. He's saying this as fact. It's undervalued by this much. He doesn't say it as, I think it's undervalued because of this discounted cash flow model we ran. It's stated more as a fact than an opinion. And C, he cannot work as a stockbroker and an analyst at the same time. While there may be some conflicts of interest between the two, this is not a hard and fast rule, and so it doesn't lead to a violation. Answer B. Martina Hinges, CFA, is a portfolio manager. In her free time, Hinges reviews the investment of her friend, Serena Walls. Hinges did not charge any fees for Walls. According to the standard of professional conduct, did Hinges violate her duty of loyalty to her employer? We've got A, no, because Hinges did not charge any fees. That sounds like a correct answer so far. She's doing this in her free time and she's not charging any fees to Walls. If she was charging fees to her outside of as a arrangement with Walls directly and going outside of her employer, that's where this would become more of an issue. But because it's just a friend and she's giving free advice, this doesn't create a conflict of interest necessarily. B, no, because this was just a one-time exercise. I would lean towards A being a better answer. The one-time exercise doesn't necessarily matter. She could give her friend ongoing advice and not charge anything if she wanted to. And I think it would still be the same outcome. And we've got C, yes, because Hinges used her expertise for someone other than her employer. You can't be forced to do this. And so we rule out C and B. Answer A. Donna Simpson had an exceptional performance year. During a meeting where Simpson is updating the client's investment policy statement, one of her clients offers her 2 NBA Finals first row tickets as a reward. Simpson's best course of action is to A, reject the offer. Not a bad option. However, the code doesn't necessarily require her to reject the offer. So we'll leave it in play, but I think there might be a better answer. Let's see. B, receive consent from her employer before accepting the offer. That, I would say, is the best answer so far. Getting consent and ensuring that your employer is okay with that and doesn't think that it creates a conflict of interest can lead to you being able to accept this generous offer. And C, accept the offer as long as she notifies her employer accordingly. We should get approval first, not accept it and then notify. Answer B. Concerning referral fees, which of the following statements is most likely accurate? A, a member is required to disclose only the fees he receives. B, a member is required to disclose only the fees that he pays. Or C, a member is required to disclose both fees received as well as paid. I think we would lean towards C as the correct answer. It'd be best practice to disclose as much as possible, so we should be disclosing both A and B, what we receive and pay. Roger Timmons and Mike Ross are 2 directors for Pan Asia Securities. They are in dispute over the use of the CFA logo designation. Timmons is very proud of the fact that everyone in their organization is a CFA charter holder. He wants to incorporate the CFA logo within the firm's letterhead. We can't do that. Ross, however, believes this would be a violation of CFA standards, which Ross is right there. You can't incorporate the CFA logo or the letters into your firm's name or logo or anything like that. So who is most likely correct? Neither Timmons nor Ross is correct. I would rule that out. I'm going to say Ross is correct and Timmons is not. B, Ross is correct. The CFA logo is to be used by individuals, not by a firm. That sounds good. I think we'll go with B. C, Timmons is correct. No, he's not. The firm can incorporate the CFA logo into its collateral materials so long as all employees are CFA members. Again, this is going to be the correct statement. It's used by individuals. It's earned by an individual taking a test. You bring that with you from firm to firm. It's not earned by a firm. Answer B. Which of the following statements is most likely accurate? A. When decision-making process focuses on short-term factors, the likelihood of unethical conduct increases. I'd say this sounds accurate so far. When we have short-term incentives, things like quarterly earnings calls, for example, these things can lead to management potentially fudging numbers if they need to make a short-term number and hit certain incentives. By being more long-term focused, it gives people a longer runway to make decisions that are more ethical and rather than needing to kind of make up for that in the short term by potentially doing something they shouldn't. So I'm going to lean towards A so far. Let's see if we can rule out the others though. B, external factors such as environmental impacts and cultural offense are the greatest indicators of ethical behavior. I would rule this out and lean towards A as the better answer still. And C, situational influences such as environmental impacts and cultural events are the greatest indicators of ethical behavior. Again, we'll rule these two things out. These two things don't necessarily tell us who's going to act or be more ethical. Think of things like greenwashing, for example, where companies are doing things that are environmentally friendly, but really just as to kind of save face on the surface. Answer A. Which of the following is least likely an objective of the GIPS standards? Is it A, firm-wide compliance, B, instilling investor confidence, or C, promoting fair global competition among investment firms? So this one's going to be A. We obviously want firms to be compliant. However, that's not necessarily the overarching objective of the GIPS standards. The main thing that we want is we want to have fair global competition and we want to instill investor confidence. And to do that, the key of GIPS is to create standards of presenting performance that are standardized across different firms and companies and countries so that investors can confidently review performance and know that it can be compared to other firms and just promote this global competition and have more confidence that what you're investing in and the companies that you're investing in can really be compared and be transparent. Answer A. A mutual fund follows a strategy where it invests in treasury securities and extremely risky securities. Treasury investments are made such that 95% of the fund value should be recovered from the treasury securities. At the end of the investment horizon, the mutual fund is planning to include one of the following statements in its communication with its clients. Statement 1, since treasury securities back the fund, investors will get guaranteed returns. This is not true since we're investing in treasuries, but we also have these extremely risky securities. So we can't guarantee the returns if some or any portion of the portfolio is in risky securities. And 2, there is no default risk on the investments made by the fund. That's also not correct, again, because of these extremely risky securities. Even if we're 95% treasuries and 5% risky, we can't say that there's no default risk or that we'll guarantee returns. So which of these statements is most likely in violation of Standard 1C misrepresentation? Is it Statement 1, Statement 2, or both? We will go with C, both of these. Robert Galvin, CFA, is a money manager. He also takes care of choosing assets for Retire Smart's pension fund. The director of Retire Smart's pension fund directs Galvin to use a particular broker for the trade in the pension fund with the intention of obtaining research with soft dollars earned from the broker. Galvin follows the instructions of the director as there is no significant difference in the price and execution. Galvin has most likely A, violated the standard 3A, loyalty, prudence, and care. B, not violated any standards if the research benefits Retire Smart. Or C, not violated any standard if the research benefits the plan beneficiaries. So the research benefiting Retire Smart, we can rule this one out for that reason, since Galvin is going to be the fiduciary to the pension fund, not to Retire Smart. So it needs to benefit the plan beneficiaries. So then between a violation and a not a violation, what's going to make this not a violation is that the soft dollars hopefully benefit these beneficiaries. And also there's no significant difference in price and execution. So we're getting this benefit and we're also getting similar price and execution. So no violation here. Answer C. Ileana Cruz, CFA, is a portfolio manager at Alpha Sense and manages a mutual fund and a pension plan. On receipt of proxies for the fund, Cruz hands it over to her administrative assistant, Tom Hillman. Cruz says that she does not have enough time to handle proxies herself because of other commitments. This is likely a violation. We should be voting proxies in favor of things that are beneficial for our shareholders in a mutual fund. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through our answers. When the proxies are for stocks owned by the pension plan, she asked Hillman to send it to the plan sponsor. Which of the following statements is most likely accurate? Cruz's policy is not a violation. We determined that there is a violation, at least on the mutual fund. On the pension plan, Hillman should also be voting these, not sending it to the plan sponsor. The money manager is going to be a lot more informed and better able to make the decisions for these proxies than the plan sponsor would be. So we've got B, Cruz policy on both the fund as well as the pension plan proxies is a violation. That sounds like it'll be our answer. And then we've got C, Cruz's policy on the fund is a violation, but the policy on the pension plan is not. We can rule that out and confidently go with answer B.